Hello and welcome to the Columbia Daily Tribune's Behind the Stripes football webcast. This is Tribune sports editor Joe Waljasper along with Tribune football beat writer David Morrison. David, Missouri coming off a 38-23 victory over Toledo. Let's look back on that one briefly during this bye week. Positives and negatives you took from that game?
Positives were they showed a resilience that they also showed in the Murray State game. I mean, they went down 14-13 against Murray State, which is truthfully a position they probably shouldn't have been in, but at least they came back and scored 45 straight points to win that game. Against Toledo, they were only up by 1 in the middle of the third quarter, which again is a position they probably shouldn't have been in, but they ended up scoring on 2 straight touchdown drives to kind of put that one away too. And this is with, Andrew Wilson off the field and, kind of in-game adversity like that. So they've shown resilience over these first 2 games. That's the positive sign. The negative sign is the defensive woes that were there in the first game showed themselves again in the second game. And judging from what Toledo did, they saw that they could take advantage of that. And that's, getting to the edge and using the speed to get by, the linebackers and getting the defensive line to commit upfield so that they could just throw the screen over top of them, and Missouri didn't have much of a recourse for that. And those are things that showed during the first game. And so, obviously, if a team can pick out trends like that from one game, then maybe teams can pick out those trends more and more as the season goes on if they don't improve.
Yeah, it wasn't like Missouri got caught by surprise in the first quarter with the screens and then tightened things up. It was pretty much the whole game long. I guess the negatives I would take from it were that they didn't necessarily dominate that game. I think they got outgained in total yardage. You could argue that Toledo, at least the first 3 quarters, outplayed them. They seemed like the better team. But on the other hand, Missouri wins by 15, and they end the game taking a knee at the 5-yard line. It could have been worse. So not an alarming game, I don't think, from Missouri's perspective, but if you were looking for them to come out and just demolish Toledo and look like a 9 or 10 win team, I didn't get that vibe really. Right. Positives, I thought James Franklin kind of further cements what you could have guessed maybe from the Murray State game. He seems to really be back to what he was before. He was a guy that you kind of knew he had it in him, but then you were kind of wondering if maybe last year, if mentally more than physically, it had sort of damaged him, but he seems fine. When they, you win by 15, and you kind of think, oh well, no big deal. But there was a time in that fourth quarter where you're like, I don't know what's going on here.
Right.
They were facing some adversity, and they weren't. And it was hot and everything else, and you just wondered, there really wasn't much of a home crowd by that point to support them. It was looking a little dicey. So it was not an insignificant win for James Franklin, I didn't think. Another concern maybe would have been that, against a team whose defense is nothing special, Missouri really, in order to run the ball at all, had to run James Franklin a lot, had to run him on the option. He had a lot of his yards rushing came scrambling. I thought that, that Murray State game, as good as that running game looked, not so much. And I thought the offensive line they did a pretty good job of pass protection, but I thought in run blocking they were pretty average at best against Toledo. That's a team you would like to think you could kind of push around.
Right, and they didn't get much of anything going inside the tackles, like you were saying. The most real estate they got was on speed options, kind of getting outside of the tackle box and having James Franklin make those decisions, whether to pitch or to keep. And so, that's obviously a step back from the Murray State game against a little bit of a tougher defense, but like you were saying, not like, Florida or not.
Yeah,
not really good
Florida gained a lot of yards rushing against Toledo. They didn't score a lot of points. They scored less points than Missouri, but they were able to run it on them. So, yeah, that might be a little bit. I think coming in, the offensive line was almost the great unknown because everybody was wildly happy that they were all healthy, but you didn't quite know how good these guys were either. And that was I didn't think was a great performance by the offensive line. Another big thing that came out of the game was the first effect on Missouri of the new targeting rule. Linebacker Andrew Wilson was called for a shot to the head in the third quarter, got kicked out of the game because of that, and then that means he will also have to sit out the first half of the Indiana game. I guess, first of all, did you think it was a correct interpretation of the rule? And then secondly, do you think the rule is a good rule?
I do feel like it was correct, and Gary Pinkel has said that, and Dave Steckles also said that, just based on the letter of the law. Watching the replay a bunch of times, which I did, you can see the forearm goes to the head, and I think that's even one of the clauses in the targeting rule is forearm hits to the head. And so, I mean, that by the letter of the targeting rule, that was the correct call and the correct ejection. And I mean, I tend to agree with the rule, especially with the spirit of the rule, keeping anything they can do to try to slow the tide of concussions and severe head injuries is obviously a good thing. In my view, it gets tough though when you're like with the Wilson play in particular. You know, Bernard Reedy's going up for the catch, he's coming down, and when Andrew Wilson's setting up to hit him, he might have thought he was going for his chest, but if Reedy ducks at the last second, then he's hitting him in the head. So, I mean, it's difficult to make those split-second decisions. But I mean, I think the call was right, and I think the rule is right. It's just kind of difficult for the defensive player.
Yeah, I think if there's a problem with it, I think that it's too punitive. As far, I don't mind them calling it as a penalty, but I don't think these players are out there, like even if you just wanted to say you're going to eject the guy for that game, I don't quite get okay, now you also have to stay out the next game, because I don't think these defensive players are, in their mind, A, are really thinking, well, I want to hurt somebody today, or B, are thinking, I'm less likely to want to do this. If I were to just get kicked out for this game, no big deal, but if I get kicked out the next game, I'm not going to do it. I don't think that's affecting it one or the other, and so I think essentially you're just penalizing them for a split-second decision. And football is a little bit different than a lot of sports. I mean, you get very few opportunities to actually play for all the work you put into it. I mean, 12 times is all you're guaranteed a year. And I don't know, you got a senior guy who's, all right, now 1/24 of your year is gone. I mean, it just seems like a little much to me. I'm all for the idea of making football better, and I don't think when you put in these rules that it drastically affects the population. I don't think we're so bloodthirsty that if we don't get hits to the head, we don't want to watch anymore. I think it's so ingrained in American society that we love football and we love gambling on football and we love everything about football. That these changes they make are fine. I don't see it as the end of the world. But I think, especially when you're talking about college kids, it'd be nice if you were maybe on the punitive side of it, the penalties, make them a little less onerous.
Yeah, and I think that's a good word, by the way.
Thank you.
And I think that another thing that Steckel was saying on Tiger Talk last night is he said that with a renewed emphasis on aiming low, he said there might be more ankle and knee injuries now than there would have been earlier, and there's no punishment for that. Like there was the hit on Eric Waters against Murray State where he just got rolled from behind on that play. And I mean that's just as dangerous as head hits, maybe not long term, obviously, with the concussion symptoms and things like that, but in the short term. And so, I mean, it will be interesting as the year goes on to kind of chart what changes, if any, this is making to player health and player safety and all that stuff.
I would add that the call that went against Missouri that kind of turned out to be pretty costly on the celebration after the Marcus Golden touchdown was sort of ridiculous. I mean, you're allowed a certain amount of excitement about making a touchdown, and he wasn't taunting the other team. I mean, that to me was the officials really becoming the fun police there.
Yeah, and it was the official made a point when I guess he was, by way of explaining it to Pinkle on the sideline, he made a point to show how forcefully he put it down, and then he pointed to it's just kind of.
Yeah, so what? Who cares? Yeah, I didn't like that call. All right, lastly, Missouri has the week off, but then they go to Indiana, which I think for a while now, people have looked at the schedule from Missouri are saying this could be really kind of the game that could kind of make or break their season. Not that Indiana's great, but it's on the road, it's at night, it's a team that can score a lot of points. So it's definitely, I think, their toughest test of the non-conference season, just based on the fact it's on the road. Now Indiana is 1-1. They're coming off a loss to Navy where they just got rolled offensively. I mean, they gave up 500 and some yards on the ground. How much do you think Missouri can see that and take heart that, Navy can do this to them, so can we, or is the fact that Navy's offense is so different than Missouri's offense that it doesn't necessarily apply?
Well, I mean, Missouri knows a little bit about having to guard that football.
They didn't have much luck either.
that offense. But, I mean, going into the season, I actually thought, played at a neutral site in space or in a vacuum or whatever, Toledo might even have been a tougher matchup for Missouri.
Or Arkansas State.
Than Indiana, just simply because I felt Toledo's defense was tougher than Indiana's defense. Indiana's defense has just been hemorrhaging yards and points each of the past, 5 or 6 years. It seems like it's been a while since they've had a defense that could stop anybody. So I mean, I feel like that that works in Missouri's favor, and I even think they might be worse. Indiana's defense might be more porous than I even thought it was going to be going into this year, because not only, they kind of gave up, like you said, all those rushing yards to, I don't want to say a gimmick offense, but a different offense, an offense you don't see every week. But they also gave up 35 points to Indiana State, which you have no business giving up 35 points. I mean, they scored 73. They're obviously a potent offense. But, I mean, I can see Missouri dropping 42 or 49 easily on Indiana. And, I mean, Indiana very well could drop 42 or 49 on Missouri also. But, I mean, I don't feel like the Navy result should give Missouri that much more confidence because, like you said, the offenses are that much different. I think what gives Missouri confidence is that their offense seems to have things a little bit more figured out, and Indiana's defense is still kind of putrid, like it has been.
Yeah, Indiana State, after scoring 35 on Indiana, played Purdue and only scored 14, so they're not a juggernaut. So I think to think Missouri's going to score more than 40 is not unrealistic whatsoever. The question is, can Missouri's defense prevent Indiana from scoring 40? It's going to be a night game. I think the other factor in Missouri's favor, though, would be they've got a little more muscle memory of winning football games than Indiana does. Indiana was 4-8 last year. Missouri was 5-7. But for the guys who have played a little at Missouri, they have experienced a little more winning. But I'll stand by. I think that is maybe it's not a conference game, but that might be the biggest game of the season. Because if you can win out in the non-con and be 4-0 going the SEC season, it'll be a lot different feeling than being 3-1 and facing the October schedule they've got to face. Anyway, we will be back next week to talk more about Indiana, since Missouri's not doing much between now and then. We'll look forward to that game against the Hoosiers.